Good day, everybody. February 23rd, 2024. I'm Connor with Honor. Today is our Friday's open house broadcast. I'm going to talk about open houses that are happening out here in Santa Clarita Valley, but I do want to talk about some information that we gleaned online from various sources out there. The first one, home sales rise to highest level since August of 2023, and that is as of January 2024, and it says supply is inching up. This headline's actually somewhat true, but probably not for the reasons you would consider to be valid. What's happening is every year, towards the end of the year, we get that slowdown, and that always happens as we approach the holiday seasons. First and foremost, a lot of people make their movements in real estate dependent on placement of children within schools. That's a big thing for those of you that don't have children yet or aren't going to have children, never have. A lot of parents that have kids, they want to make that move dependent on maybe getting a better position or living in a better area so their kids can go to maybe public school if they have been going to private and so on. So they're looking for those options out there. That typically starts to happen more in the spring and summer times because those folks have their kids in school the other times in the year, depending on where they live and traditional school seasons, real summers off and those sorts of things. But that is really movement dependent. And then every year we have the holiday season, as we had this last year, same thing. So August, September, everything slows down. September, October, we start to get into the holidays. You got your Halloween, then you got your Thanksgiving coming up November, then you got Christmas, then boom, back into January, then you have the first part of the year, you have New Year's, and then you have Super Bowl, right? So then that happens, everybody's still distracted, but then after Super Bowl, things change a little bit. Even with the high interest rates, we have that increase in real estate listings. Currently in Santa Clarita Valley, all total, 294. We were at 284, I believe, yesterday, or 280. I do these shows every day. I believe that's where we were, but now we're at 294, so we're inching up. When I started the show this last week, we were in the 250s, 260s, so you can see the inventory is getting more. However, that same inventory isn't moving any faster than it already has been, and we started to see those changes implemented in January. So we have 7 days, 10 days on market prior to houses out here in Santa Clarita Valley getting into escrow. For you sellers out there, that's massive. That's huge stuff. Good news for you. For real estate buyers, that means your competition level is still very high and you're still going to be running into multiple offer situations with properties and potentially giving up things that you might not be absolutely comfortable with. And I only mention that because there are folks out there that will talk to their buyers, and their buyers do things that potentially they might not want to do because they really don't understand how the process works. And I'll give you an example. If you're working with somebody and they're telling you, hey, it would really benefit you to remove the contingencies, and I'll give you an example, the loan contingency. Let's say you're going in, you need to borrow money to purchase real estate, and you need a loan to do so. Your agent might say, listen, to be more competitive, you should remove your loan contingency. Well, what that really means, folks, is if you get rid of your loan contingency, you get into escrow, and for whatever reason, your lender's unable to get you a loan because something they didn't see, or maybe something changed. Maybe you went and you thought it was a good idea to pay off your Sears card, if there even is a Sears anymore, but you went to pay that credit card off thinking that that's going to help. In actuality, you paid it off. Your DTI, your debt to income ratio, was high. Maybe the company said, you know what, we paid this off. Let's go ahead and recoup. We're going to reduce their credit limit on this paid off credit card. Instead of being $5,000, you paid it off, we're going to reduce it to $1,000. Well, now your credit profile has been injured because of your action, because you didn't ask your lender first. However, to remove that contingency means that, okay, I will proceed with the listing, still proceed with the purchase, even if I'm unable to get a loan, but you can't, right? So now all of a sudden what happens? Well, the deposit that you put into the property, because you've removed that contingency, it doesn't exist anymore. That deposit now becomes property of the seller, if in fact that's how that ends up playing out. But that's how dangerous it is to remove contingencies. And we really don't know who we're dealing with. There's a lot of deep fakes, a lot of bad information out there online. I built my system, ConnorWithHonor.com. I take the videos I do, I produce those, and I produce content from these so people can see what's happening in the market. So that's where the big headlines are, talking about how January is more spectacular than even December, and even how January's numbers are now finally even more than the highest sales numbers we saw back in August. Folks, that's a yearly holiday slowdown. The other thing that's impacting the market that we talk about quite frequently, and everybody seems to, is the interest rates. And yes, they are higher than normal, but not higher than the national average on the much larger scale. I remember when my parents bought their house way back in the day, we're talking 16, 18, 20% interest rates in some cases. So that financing was a lot more creative, where the sellers were doing a lot more than they would do today to try to help somebody obtain financing so they could get their house sold. But also don't forget, back when my parents bought their first house, I can't imagine that house being more than $30,000, and even today, because of where it's located in another state, probably not worth more than $60,000 or $65,000. So your market is going to depend on how your real estate portfolio performs. And whenever I'm talking to both buyers and sellers out there, and especially real estate buyers, because the sellers have already at least been through it once, they have one property, but the buyers, when they approach real estate, it's super important to start building that intelligence where you're looking at things as a savvy real estate investor would. You're looking at properties as somebody that really builds their world and their financial wealth off of real estate. It is a fantastic tool to use whenever you're looking at even the very first house you're buying. And I have a couple I'm representing that they're buying their first house. They're in their early 20s, which is fantastic, way ahead of the curve. They're going to be buying their first house together. And I told them as we were talking, we haven't looked at one house yet, but I said, listen, when you go in and we start looking at residential real estate, this particular house, your first one, do your best to hold on to it. That's the one. That's going to be your keystone house. That's the one, your foundational element. That's going to be your home that keeps you protected and that you try to get paid off. Try not to leverage anything against it. And then from that residence, that's where you're going to start building your wealth. So if in fact you have equity in that house at one point, and you want to take that equity out to make another purchase, maybe a move-up purchase, still try to do it so you retain the house, maybe get some tenants in there, maybe get some renters. Now all of a sudden you have that mortgage plus being taken care of, depending on how that rental market is at that time. But then you have that residence taken care of, and you use a little bit of equity and maybe some money you've been able to save as well to make that move up. And then you just continue, so you leapfrog residence to residence. And then at the end of 10, 15, 20 years, you have this great real estate portfolio. And if we look back at real estate prices historically, we're not going to see that those prices are actually going to reduce over time. Historically, real estate prices have just continued to go up over time. So if you would have bought a house back in when my parents did, maybe in a much better market like Southern California, we would see them having a lot more wealth than they ended up dying with, which wasn't much. But that's something to think about. So let's talk about some open houses and what's happening in Santa Clarita Valley. If you are out looking at open houses, my recommendation, I talk to my clients about this as well, you can go in and you can tell the agent all day long you're working with somebody else or you're not working with somebody else. Just be wary of wherever you give up any personal or private information. They're probably going to have some kind of a log there that you'll be signing. They're probably going to want you to give up your information. They might say that, hey, my seller really wants to know who's coming in, so maybe we can follow up and see if they like the residence. That being the case, make sure that you look at that and figure out if in fact you want to. And if you don't, you can put down your agent's name or Connor with Honor, whatever it may be. And usually when you walk into open houses, you don't know who you're going to get, if that's actually the agent working for the seller who's under contract with the seller, or if it's someone else just representing the open house trying to get more leads. And that's really why it's being held open, not only to sell the residence, which statistically, less than 3%, I believe the National Association of Realtors reports, open houses actually sell. But that's 3% you wouldn't have without it, as I tell my sellers. But on the other side of it, the biggest motivation for an open house are the leads. These are buyers coming in, ladies and gentlemen, that want to look at a residence. So I'm there with all my bells and whistles on, and I give them the beautiful spiel and say, hey, this house could be yours. When in actuality, anybody that goes into an open house, they're going to have to battle it out with the other people that are writing offers on that particular residence in most cases. And I say in most cases because there are very odd situations where sellers out there will take the first offer in. They won't entertain anything else, they'll take the first one in. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is incredibly rare in any real estate circumstance, because that is an event where the seller is not getting what they possibly could out of the residence. And maybe it's because of inconvenience, and there's a lot of websites as well that are out there that say, let us sell your house hassle-free. Well, hassle-free means nobody's going to come out and really engage with the individual. The house isn't going to be shown, so you don't have to worry about picking it up. But what does that cost? At the end of the day, how much more money are you going to be giving up because you don't want to be hassled? As far as I'm concerned, folks, hassle me a little bit. It's worth it if I'm going to bring in an extra $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in profit, instead of trying to use a company where they're going to just do something half-assed and not give me what I really need or what the equity represents in the real estate that I'm selling. So watch out for these things out there. There's a lot of bad information online. We're going to see even more in the future. When it comes to your home's value, I'm not a chat bot. I'm a real, living, breathing human being. This is my voice. This is me talking to you. And what I would suggest is this. If you're curious what your house is worth, pick up the phone and you call me. Go to connorwithhonor.com and fill out a form, the contact form, or call me from there, whichever you want, and then I will pull up the value. A few ways to look at this when you're talking about residential real estate values. You want to look at the actual data of sold properties that are very much comparable to yours. If you're wanting to sell something in Valencia, California, in the North Park area, for example, and the house is a 4-bedroom and it's 2 stories and it was built 14 years ago, this particular residence has 22 or 2,300 square feet. It's got a good sized yard, but the houses are somewhat close together. Comparing that residence with a residence that's similar but in Las Vegas or in another state or something that doesn't match up, that isn't a good value. And we're seeing some of the information online skewed by some of the syndication sites out there. Basically, you go on there, you put in what your property is worth, and they give you this fantastical value. And all of a sudden you're very excited because you might actually be able to sell your home for so much more money. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of times when I look at those figures are pie in the sky, and I'm not sure where they're getting that data from. But the information doesn't exist, and the actual information is not something that we can compare to the other residences. They're using data that doesn't exist. And then in some cases, because they're trying to get you influence a decision, selling or buying, whatever it may be. Then on the other side of it, we look at the data, and sometimes it's low, but again, it's manipulated and put in place to try to get you to do something potentially that you might not be ready to do. The true information is having somebody give it to you that has given by somebody that has knowledge and experience. I've been doing this since 1998 and understands the pricing process. Then after that, you can beat me up about commissions and costs and all that stuff, because the world is a very fair place and I enjoy arguing and talking and discussing my commission and how my value is and why it's worth it for you. But again, at the end of the day, that's still your decision to make. So if you're looking online for open houses, you can go to SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com. That's my system. You'll see them there. I'll repost for today. So you see all the freshest new houses out there that are advertised for sale. But what's going to end up happening is you're going to be driving around, you're going to be running into some, and you're going to be walking in there. And again, it's your choice how you want to be, what you want to say, and so on. I'll throw one more thing out there. On Thursdays, we did our open house broadcast, our new housing broadcast for Santa Clarita Valley. I had that posted where I interviewed Josh Calderon at Toll Brothers. Fantastic young man. Been working in the new housing world. He's probably not that young, but he looks good. Anyway, he's working in the new housing world for better than 20 years. People say, at least agents, I remember when I first started, oh, they have it easy. Those new housing agents, it's because they could not perform in the resale world. That's why they're selling new housing. I beg to differ, and I beg to differ because of this. Most cases, the new housing agent, they really have to live by those reviews. They have to live by the way that those sellers and buyers, especially of new housing, interact with them and their experience. If they're in that game for too long and they are completely a screw up and they piss everybody off, they're going to end up not being a new housing agent for very long. But somebody that's stuck it out for 20 years like Josh, my hat's off to that man. I'm Connor with Honor. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please share. You can find me online at connorwithhonor.com talking about new housing if you want to see those. I do have a system in place for that. connorwithhonor.com/new. And you'll be able to get to that widget and see all the new properties that happen to be listed for sale here in Southern California. And for others, we always have a tour that we like to set up with those of you that are interested in new housing, so I can be with you your very first visit, and then from there we can discuss better options, maybe how to get better financing, more incentives, maybe bigger builder discounts, lots of things, because in some cases when you have your own agent on your side when it comes to new housing, the negotiation becomes now two-party. So now I'm on your side, the builder's agent is on their side, so then we get to come together and attempt to get you more than what you normally would without having your own representative. I'm Connor with Honor. We'll see you tomorrow. Be well. Over and out.